Rangers fans, welcome to season 3 of Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chonley, alongside Nick Zararis. And Nick, the Rangers play the Blues today, but that's like number 74 on the agenda, 96, if you will, maybe. With the news from Elliot Friedman and Elmi Kaplan as well, the Rangers might look to move both Jacob Trouba, which, stop me if you've heard
You're
this one
telling me this
before.
first time. I
And
didn't
also
know that.
it's the first time we're hearing about this, actually. And also, apparently, Chris Krider.
Look, there is always going to be especially for people like us who are media literate, who work in media, who know how this works. The inside baseball of this is a lot more interesting than the report itself, because frankly, yes, they do need a kick in the butt. 2 weeks ago, we were both, give Berard a look before Osman had gotten hurt. Let's get Osman up here. Just a shot in the arm, a kick in the butt, anything to show that the season still mattered, because they were taking advantage of the bad teams, beating Seattle, taking advantage of the weak opportunities in front of them. And then you lose to Calgary the way you did, and you lose to the Oilers the way you did. And then all of a sudden, the people who are yelling into the void on the internet about the team not being that good don't seem that crazy. I know sometimes on the timeline, I have the demeanor of an unwell person at the bus stop,
It makes two of us.
yelling at anyone who will listen that the end is near.
Right.
But at a certain point, we're doing the same thing over and over again here. You can change the auxiliary pieces. 3 years ago, the third line left wing was not Will Cooley. Will Cooley's better than what they had, but Will Cooley, for as good as he is not demonstratively making that much of a difference come April or May against quality opponents. He doesn't play enough minutes. He is not dynamic enough of a player. You can look back to, and ultimately, this all starts with the defense. We have said for the better part of the last 15 years, you can go back to the Tortorella Rangers. The Rangers aren't good at evaluating defensemen.
Nope.
They fundamentally are not good at evaluating the traits that make a successful NHL defenseman. It took the Rangers an extra 2 or 3 seasons to realize, the position is trending smaller and faster, while the rest of the league was getting faster and better at handling the puck. The Rangers were still prioritizing things like size, like blocking shots, like physicality, and
Hashtag warrior mentality, etc.
And none of their physical defensemen are actually physical all of that much. Like Trouba's the most passive defenseman in the entire NHL as far as stepping up in the neutral zone to make a play on the puck.
Except for when he can turn a 2v2 into a 2v1, when he can go and chicken hunt people.
Hey, man, as long as I live, I'm never going to forget him pulling up to go after someone who didn't have the puck in an elimination game against the Panthers.
That play has been seared
burned into my brain. That and him launching himself headfirst into the glass trying to check Natchez, who very clearly said, that's a grown man flying at me. I'm going to duck.
Also,
and then Trouba flew over him headfirst into the glass.
The fact that everybody that is a part of the Rangers organization, front office, watched those two plays and said, we can bring him back. It's all good.
And that's why someone's lying.
And he's, by the way, still the captain of this team.
And that fundamentally is why someone is lying somewhere in this process, because the reporting draft weekend, and I can vividly picture this because Friday and Saturday of that weekend, the Euros were on, so I was out both days. And Copa America was on Friday night. Friday night, we're out in Hoboken until like 2 a.m, and then there's soccer the next morning at 9 a.m. I wake up at 8:30. I see conjecture, blah, 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 what's going to happen in the draft today. And I was standing at a table, and Italy was playing Albania. I was standing at a table, and
the fact that you remember this is, by the way, patently absurd. I just want to point that out.
I remember seeing the tweet. Rangers are looking to move Jacob Trouba. Deal is in works. Then that was followed up a few hours later. Emily Kaplan also reported deal progressing along. It's not right now, but expect this by the end of the day today. That's the Saturday of the NHL draft, which is a few days ahead of free agency.
She went on TV, said the same thing. I remember that very well.
On NHL Network. Yeah, she went on NHL Network and repeated Friedman's reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happened Saturday. Nothing happened Sunday. Monday night at about 7 or 8 o'clock, Larry Brooks writes a column in which he says, the Rangers fear that if they were to trade Jacob Trouba, he would fail to report to the team that acquired him because his wife is still doing the last year of her medical residency. And that was the end of the story. There was no follow-ups. There was no, and then people had the balls to say, well, no, there was no trade. There was never going to be a trade. It wasn't close, even though Elliot and Emily reported. So someone somewhere was lying, whether it was the person that was lying to Elliot and Emily or the person talking to Larry. Someone in that sequence was lying. One of those two narratives is true. And we're dealing with the byproduct of that now, 4 or 5 months later. Wait, June, July, August, like 6 months later. We're dealing with the repercussions of that 6 months later because that was never properly addressed. And now, and the big thing, and the reason I'm kind of mad about this, and I feel like my intelligence is being insulted, is that they are telling us that, well, Chris Drury wants everyone to know that complacency isn't acceptable. My brother in Christ, you are the one who dictates who's on the team. If you don't want guys on the team, you can find ways to make it happen. Remember when you waived Barkley Goodrow and got unanimous kudos for doing the right thing? That Larry Brooks said you were ruthless and you would do whatever it takes to win. And then a week later, it was, I'm sorry, too hard to trade Jacob Trouba. Can't do that. You don't get to say the team is complacent when you are the poster boy of complacency. You have refused to take swings. You have refused to burn assets on real swings. You know, burning 3rd-round picks on Alex Wenberg and Jack Roslovic, a 2nd-round pick on Patrick Kane, a 2nd-round pick on Nico Mikula and Tarasenko. Those are not swings. You know, I forget who said it a few weeks ago, but after one of the games the Rangers lost and Florida had won that night, somebody tweeted to the effect of, Florida won the President's Trophy, had Huberdeau finish, I think it was 4th or 5th in MVP voting. Bill Zito looked around and said, this isn't good enough. We can do better than this, and swung for the goddamn fences. Now, Chris Drury can't do that because he gave Zibanejad a no-trade clause, because he gave Trocheck
no
a
move
no-trade
clause. He's
Yeah.
locked in, baby.
Yeah, no. Zibanejad is locked in longer than the island of Manhattan is going to be above water. The island of Manhattan is going to be underwater, and Mika Zibanejad is still going to be under contract. Yeah, look, man, at a certain point, and I said this during the game on Saturday night. I was telling you before. I started watching the game. I was at the AEW show. I saw Big Boom AJ bring the boom. It was a delight. I was very amused. I saw the Rizzler in person. Looks a lot shorter in person than he does on TikTok. But I was watching the Ranger game on my phone. The card was starting to drag. An AEW show is like 4.5, 5 hours long. The game starts at 10 o'clock. There's still an hour and a half of wrestling on. I say, all right, let me check in on the Oiler game, the Ranger Oiler game for a little bit. The first 15 minutes go okay. They let Podkolzin, who hasn't scored a goal since March of 2023, score a goal. And I go, well, that's not great. But Edmonton's terrible defensively. The Rangers can easily get back in this game.
And, it was a nice shot. Like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and it was a good they set up a nice goal. It was a nice play. Draisaitl set it up nicely. It was a good shot, whatever. Yeah. And then they let Janmark, Janmark had a nice run in the cup final last year on the penalty kill. Him and Connor Brown scored a lot of shorthanded goals. But to have Trocheck, Fox, and Lafreniere all looking at Matthias Janmark, nobody busting their ass to come back from the offensive or the neutral zone to come back, and to let Darnell Nurse, who since being violently concussed by Ryan Reeves, has actually played really well. He might have gotten some sense knocked into him, kind of like rookie of the year.
His celebration afterwards, he's like hitting his knocking his own head. The one of the fundamental issues too, and that goal is a good example of it, is okay, let's say Krider's traded. How does that impact the way that Trocheck and Lafreniere and those guys hustle back on defense? How does, you want to move Trouba, which we've been, on board with for years now. Okay, you move him. He wasn't on the ice for that goal against. And, it's one goal, it's a microcosm, but it's really a good summary of where this team is at. Where, you can trade certain people. You can say, oh, no one should be complacent, no one should be happy, and no one should be, comfortable in where they are. But you move one or two players around, you change a couple of nameplates.
I thought we cared about morale, Andrew. I thought everybody was so close and good friends that we couldn't disrupt the locker room.
Right.
But as soon as it reflected badly on the general manager, that doesn't matter anymore.
Of course. But okay, so you change a couple of nameplates, but how does that change the fact that no one is playing the structure that's put in place?
No one forechecks on this team at all.
Peter Laviolette has a structure. I would think so. I mean, he's been in the league for a million years. I
They
would
did
think he
it
knows
last
how
year.
to.
They
Yeah,
won
they
the
did do it
President's
last year
Trophy playing
exactly.
well with
So
not a good third line center all
right,
year.
my question is, I'm fully on board with making roster changes as you are as well. We've been beating on this drum for multiple seasons now, where bigger name players should be swapped out at this stage of of the Rangers' current lifespan and a current window, if you will. That hasn't happened yet. Maybe it will now. I'll kind of believe it when I see it at this point. But how does that change the mental fortitude of this team? Because again, you can trade Krider, but that won't make Trocheck back check any better. That won't make the defensive structure all of a sudden realize, oh yeah, we have to do this again. We should go and do that. Like, we should be here because that's going to prevent the 2-on-1 the other way. Oh, if I don't skate back, then Nurse is going to score the goal, which he did. Trading players is good, and you should do that. Right, within within the Rangers context. It's something that we've talked about for a long time, but is that going to change the formula? Like, that's the thing that we have to think about here is, okay, well, certain players can go and you're going to bring certain people in, but are those new people going to fundamentally change the way this team functions?
No, and that's the thing. We said this after they lost to Tampa Bay 3 years ago. Said this after the Devil series. I wrote 3,500 words about it after the Devil series. The Rangers star players don't play a style of hockey that is particularly conducive to playoff success. It is too volatile and it is too dependent on a handful of players making plays outside of structure. And I always make this comparison when I'm talking about the Oilers because it's the same kind of deal with when McDavid and Draisaitl don't do their part. The Rangers, when they're in these funks, they're swimming against a riptide. You know how at the beach they got the signs that say you're supposed to swim parallel to the beach and get out of the tide? Well, the Rangers are stubborn. They're going to try and swim as hard as they can against the riptide, tire themselves out, and need a lifeguard to come and get them. And that's Shesterkin. That's Adam Fox. That's Panarin. When the Rangers are in these funks where they refuse to put the work in, to grind, to cycle, to forecheck, their game looks terrible. And I know a lot of people say it's laziness. I would argue they are playing even harder when they are playing this badly because they're playing outside of structure, because they aren't making smart decisions, because they're trying to speed up
Forcing way too many passes to
that's the
nobody in
biggest thing.
particular.
That's the telltale sign of a team that is struggling is the transition play is, that's like the ligaments and the tendons that connect all the joints and make your body move. When you don't have the transition play, that's your bone on bone grinding against each other. And sure, you can still walk as your knee joints grind against each other, but it feels a lot better when the ligaments and tendons in your knees work. And that's kind of how the Rangers have played hockey for the last week and a half. That, sure, they're still scoring some goals. They occasionally make some good defensive plays. Quick bailed them out against Seattle. They were in that Calgary game inexplicably scoring 2 goals in 2 minutes. Other than that, non-competitive effort. And then Saturday night, Edmonton has been playing mediocre hockey the entire season. They have been very similarly to the Rangers. They have beaten up on bad teams and they have lost to the good teams they've played. They have 3 wins against Nashville. They beat the Islanders. They've lost to the Flames. They've lost to the Flames 2 of the 3 times they've played. They lost to Winnipeg the 1 time they played. Very similar boats. But Edmonton, for all of their flaws, and they have very similar issues to the Rangers in that they don't like to cycle, they don't like to forecheck, they don't have great defense. They have 1 good defensive pair, very much like the Rangers. But you wouldn't know it based on Saturday night. Matthias Janmark looked pretty good out there for somebody who has like 24 points a season. And look, when you're playing McDavid and Draisaitl, anything bad is going to look 8 times worse because of how good those guys are. And the ability to just put so much stress on the Rangers defense. And you never want to say, you don't like doing I told you so because it's unbecoming, and part of being smart and part of putting the work in is knowing and feeling confident in your decisions. But at a certain point, man, if the general manager is as good as his job as he thinks he is, where's the proof? Where is the proof? Because if you really felt that this team was close, you wouldn't need to saber rattle and say, well, we're
Yeah.
going to start trading guys.
If
You
you,
wouldn't
if you
need.
felt you were so close, you wouldn't need to posturize like this.
Yeah,
There's
that's the thing. It's fake. It's
yeah.
trying to be something you're not.
Yeah.
And the Rangers are
Like,
obsessed with
oh, you
this.
better watch out. Like, I might trade you. It's like, where
The
was this?
Rangers,
Where was this before? And
the
if
Rangers,
you were, actually going to do it, you wouldn't have to wave the stick around. You'd actually just do it.
the Rangers are obsessed with being things they're not. They love trying to be physical and tough, and that's why we get Matt Rempe when they're not that team. If you want to be a physical and imposing team, you get guys like Evan Rodriguez and Sam Bennett, functional hockey players who can forecheck, cycle, and hit the shit out of you. You don't lop on Ryan Reeves, Barclay Goodrow, and Patrick Nemeth and say, okay, we've met our toughness quota, because that's not how toughness works. You adding tough guys to a soft team does not make a team tough. You have 3 tough guys and you still have a soft team. It's the
Yeah.
same exact boat right now. The Rangers want to posture that they're this great Stanley Cup contender, that they're really close. Well, if you were really close, you wouldn't need to do this. And it's the same thing how they always say, well, we have a great leadership group. Where is it? If you need to tell me it's a great leadership group, it's not. It's the
not.
joke about wearing the T-shirt.
Yeah.
My leadership group is so great. Why are you asking me questions about it? If you need to tell me something, and because
Yeah.
I can't see it, like you're talking to your English teacher in like 10th grade, show me, don't tell me.
Right.
Yes, show me you have good leaders. We
Yeah.
didn't even get the token Trouba dirty hit or fight on Saturday night. That's how defeated
We didn't
they
get
were.
the helmet throw. Where's the helmet throw?
You can only play the greatest hits so many times, Andrew. Cheap Trick can play Surrender 6 times in an hour and a half set, but they do have to play other songs at some point. Look,
Yeah.
we're sickos. I'll watch the game against the
Sure.
Blues tonight, but for the love of God, if you're watching this, do something else. Call your parents, tell your mom you love her, do some laundry, try a new recipe, do a New York Times cross. There's a million things better to do than watch the Rangers play Matt Rempe and Brett Berard against the St. Louis Blues and Jim Montgomery. For the love of God.
Matt Rempe is going to get 4 minutes of ice time. Zibanejad is going to get double shifted and contribute nothing. And then the Rangers might win this game off of Shesterkin making 70 saves.
Binnington, Gerard Gallant owes Binnington a check because he got him through the rest of that 21. We all remember this, right?
Yeah,
the December game against the Blues, they were in the middle of like a 4 or 5 game losing streak. They reported it retroactively a few months later that if Gallant had lost that game, the plan was to go to Barry Trotz, who was unemployed at the time, to take over in December of that season. Ultimately, Jordan Binnington led into absolute stinkers. The Rangers won in that third period. They stabilized enough to make the playoffs and, of course, lost to the Devils. At this point...
And we gotta... I want to highlight this comment here because Nicholas Mott is on YouTube Live and he's saying, he's not cool with trading a guy who had one of the most clutch playoff periods in New York Rangers history. And here's the thing, man. We love Chris Krider for that period. That was one of the best periods of all time in a Rangers jersey for a player. And his credit, he said, he looked around and said, okay, no one else is going to do it, so I have to do it. I have to be the one to do it because there's clearly no one else wants to do this, so I'm going to do it myself. Okay. And then also Freddie Anderson helped, for sure. Freddie Anderson did not have the best period of all time. Krider definitely, put the team on his back. Anderson helped out a little bit. Let's be objective about it. Yes, I completely agree. And I don't think trading Krider is the best option right now.
Hey, man, if you want to do inside baseball even more on that, there are people who are saying, well, they had to say somebody else's name with Trouba just to not hurt Trouba's feelings. They couldn't just say Trouba, so they had to throw someone else out there. And they know Chris Krider has no emotions and shows no affect ever, and this won't faze him. And that's why he's not the captain of the team. Right, if you like the inside baseball and the conjecture and trying to theorize, that's the argument here. Krider isn't playing well, but he's not the problem.
Krider isn't the... He's not playing particularly well, and the 5-on-5 issues have been, growing, for a couple of seasons now. But and would you say he's one of the problems? I mean, you could, there's an argument to be had there, especially at 5-on-5. On the power play, still lethal. When he gets in front of the net, he's one of the best deflection goal scorers in the history of the NHL. But even with that aside, that period was fantastic. And we'll remember that period forever. That shouldn't be the reason why you trade or don't trade somebody. One period, for as great as that 20 minutes was, for as fantastic as those shifts were, though that 20 minutes should not be the be all end all for we should trade him immediately, we should never trade him ever. Those extremes based off 20 minutes get you nowhere. And if trading Chris Krider somehow, some way gets you a package in return that immediately makes this team better right now, that is something that Chris Drury has to explore. Like Nick mentioned, earlier on the show, the Florida Panthers won the President's Trophy. Jonathan Huberdeau was getting 1,000,000 points, MVP, consideration,
And
and then Bill
Mackenzie
Zito.
Weegar too. Don't
And
forget.
Uyghur as well. And Bill Zito said, we can still play better than this with other players. And he did it. And what do you know? The Panthers won the Stanley Cup. Obviously, that is, a very
That's
easy
an outlier.
That's an
outlier
outlier.
situation.
That's also, a generalization. There's, clearly a multitude of other reasons the Panthers won. And, we don't have 7 hours to go into a deep dive about the Panthers winning the cup. So, we're kind of overgeneralizing right now. But the bottom line is, if there is a trade that makes the team better right now, because your cup window is right now, if you call yourself a cup contender and you think that you're right there, as you keep saying for all these years that you're, right there, a couple bounces, go your way or whatever, eventually at a certain point, you can't say that anymore if you keep running it back with the same team and not getting the same results. If there is a trade that makes the team better, you have to at least consider it. Krider with that third period or no third period.
One thing I want to add on to that, this is also because Drury can't just fire Laviolette after winning the President's Trophy last year. Because that's the knee-jerk solution to this type of problem is you fire the coach and you look for the interim coach bump. Now, you lost out on Jim Montgomery. He was unemployed for about 5 minutes. There was 5 minutes.
Literally 5 days.
Literally 5 days. There was a moment or two there where I was genuinely thinking to myself, is there any way I could convince myself to get there? And being that the Rangers, I think, are done paying Gerard Gallant after firing him, because I think he had a 3-year contract. Last year was the last year of that contract. I think there's a world where I could have sold myself on, if they really are desperate and they really want to shake things up, they could do this. But then again, that's not the Rangers' MO. I couldn't tell you. The last time they fired a coach in season was Tom Rennie in 2009, and then Tortorella took over for the last 15 games. And that was a Glenn Sather decision. Glenn was a lot more hair trigger. I know there are people out there who are saying that Sather, who lives in Edmonton now full time, is definitely still on the radar. Very well could have talked to Drury over the weekend and tried to inspire something to shake things up. But at a certain point, you have to.
Is this really a coach problem though? Because
we said the same thing after Gallant. Gallant wasn't a good coach, but it's not his fault. The guys don't forecheck, they don't cycle, they don't play gap control.
I would have to imagine, right? I mean, I'm not in these practices, so what do I know? But my assumption is that Peter Laviolette, in practice, makes the team practice defensive schemes, forechecking, etc. I would have to think that is a focus in practice and also in the film room. The fact that the Rangers do all of that and then go to the game and then don't do any of that, that is at a certain point not on the coaching staff. I can't plug in my controller and make people back check. I just can't, no matter how much I'd like to, Peter Laviolette just can't take over for somebody.
A few more years. We'll be there. They'll put chips in the
we'll
players.
We'll be there with AI in these implants. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But as of right now, coaches can't make players do anything. We can, coaches can
coach. They can coach.
Yeah, they can coach, but they can't actually, play some.
You can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink.
Yeah. So, how much of this is a coaching issue is kind of up in the air right now, but a lot of this has to do with how many more coaches does this core have to go through before it's a core problem. And we've by the way have been very vocal about this being a core problem for a while, but the rest of the organization has to understand that you can't just change the head coach and expect things to change, because now this core has been through multiple of them, and yet the same problems continue to happen. No matter what coach with a different structure, with a different voice, gets in that room and says, all the sweet nothings that head coaches say, if the play on the ice doesn't change, what does that tell you about the core? That's Sounds like it's a core thing. I don't know, but what do I know?
The one other thing I wanted to talk about, because this came up naturally in conversation that I was having with someone earlier this morning. How is this the Rangers the best they can do organizational depth-wise? How is Matt Rempe the 14th or 15th forward to come up? Like, that is a developmental player. Brett Berard, I understand you want to reward him. He's having a good first month. He had a good training camp. That's a little bit different. We all know Matt Rempe needs to play more minutes, and he's only going to get 5 or 6 minutes. And maybe this is only a day or two, that Krider's day-to-day injury, and it's fine. Rempe will go back down. Same thing with the back end. How did it make sense to fly Victor Mancini across the continent, get him to Edmonton at like 4 a.m, get no sleep, practice, and play in a game, as opposed to playing Chad Ruhwedel, who was with the team
Who was
already?
there?
How does that make sense? Please, for the love of God, someone tell me how these decisions make sense. How does it make sense to, and look, Mancini's not ready. How are you going to have a kid who's not ready for the NHL have no sleep, fly cross continent, and then play against McDavid and Draisaitl? You know the first Draisaitl goal where he just kept spamming poke check, wondering why he wasn't winning the puck? Yeah, because he's not ready for the NHL.
Yeah.
He didn't move his feet at all. He kept reaching with his stick like it was a sword in a fencing match. Oh, I'm not getting the puck. Something's wrong here. No, that's one of the best players in the world. And you sent a 20-something-year-old who was playing college hockey at Omaha, Nebraska to play against him. That is an organizational failure. I understand you don't have high expectations for Chad Ruhwedel, and the idea is ceiling versus floor. At a certain point, we need to be adults here. I understand that the pet projects, they get a lot more run than they deserve. And Mancini clearly is a 5th-round pick who's getting NHL minutes over some of the other guys who have been drafted higher. But again, I want to say this because this is part of a larger point.
Also, Hito was flown out.
Yeah.
He's not only did he not play in Calgary and Edmonton, he's not playing tonight at home either. So why
he couldn't have just used the rest? He could have stayed at home.
Fly him out?
It's weird. These decisions are weird. And this was part of a larger point. The Rangers organizational depth stinks. How is Matt Rempe and Victor Mancini the best we can do for a spot start? I understand the AHL has rules. You can only have X number of guys over the age of 25, but that's the point of having those types of guys. I understand that they have really overhauled the way they do things down there, and that Drury has really used a lot of picks to try and fill out the organization. But like, Othman's hurt. I understand he probably would have been the next call up before Rempe for this type of thing. But again, you can't do better than this. This is the team that's going to win the Stanley. And we talked about this before the season. You're going to go through between 30 and 35 players over the course of an entire season. Just because the first 18 and the 2 goalies look great, I'm sure there will be a 3rd goalie start at some point this season. I'm sure we will see forwards and defensemen who have yet to play get called up at some point. For a Stanley Cup contender, you need better organizational depth. And you don't get to tell me, well, they're making do. They'll be okay. When the big guys can't play well, and the drop-off between replacement level and below replacement level is as big as it is in this organization, that is an indictment of the general manager. As much as we all can sit here, we could talk about what ifs, ands, or buts, getting in the time machine, preventing this move or that move. We're way too down the road. And at this point, this is what the team is. There is no silver bullet trade. Like, even if you want to get nuts and say, like, maybe they can try and find a way to do like a Trevor Zegras trade. God bless him. Trevor Zegras is not making Mika Zibanejad play better defense. He's not. He's not making Vinny Trocheck back check.
No.
He's not making the 4th line be able to cycle the puck.
We'll be lucky if Zegras back checks. Forget about everybody else.
Exactly. At a certain point, you are what you are.
Yeah.
You can say, and this ties back to what we were saying before about the Rangers caring more about appearances than actually materially changing things. That's what leaking to the media is. It is caring more about how you are perceived than actually fixing what's wrong.
Well, and the amount of people that I've gotten my mentions, I'm sure you get in your mentions and as well, that are like, oh, but the Rangers are 12-6. Oh, it's fine. They'll figure it out. It's okay. But And
The
I quote.
goal here isn't to just make the
Yeah, right.
playoffs.
Well, at that, and also, and I quote tweeted one of those tweets, and I was like, me when I only read the box score and don't watch any of the games. But also, I tweeted this out yesterday. It's still true today. Against the teams that are currently in a playoff position, the Rangers are 1-6. If
Yep.
you want to say the Canucks are a playoff team, I worded this in such a way that like the Canucks are currently not at a playoff spot, so I didn't put this on the list. If you want to add Vancouver to that list and make them 2-6, by all means. But the Rangers are currently 1-6 against players that are currently in a playoff position. They beat Toronto and they lost against Florida, Washington, Buffalo, by the way, a playoff team right now, Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton. So 11 of their 12 wins are against teams that are not currently in the playoffs. So if they're Stanley Cup contenders, allegedly, and they can't beat any team besides, I guess, Toronto, that are currently in a playoff spot that will be battling the Rangers in the playoffs, why are they contenders? You can't play Detroit in the playoffs. And even then, they didn't play well against Detroit. It was Jonathan Quick who saved the day. Like, against Ottawa, who is a tire fire. They barely beat Ottawa because of goaltending. Like, the game against Vancouver was a little bit more, it was better. It was one of their better performances, and then they followed it up with a trash can performance against Calgary, who they only again barely they only gave up 3 goals against Calgary, and they gave up like 70 shots. And they play against Edmonton, and they got absolutely destroyed. I mean, it wasn't even close. There was no effort. There was not a whole lot of anything really going on. I mean, Jonathan Quick was left out to dry. You can't blame anything on him because like the team just didn't play in front of him. They said, "See you later. Go have fun against Draisaitl and McDavid. We're gonna be out here and we're gonna talk sweet nothings into the mic after the game that we're disappointed and we gotta give a better effort." Like at a certain point, things gotta change.
At
They
a certain
have to.
point, you're insulting our intelligence. That's the thing that irks me. I understand that most people don't engage with their sports like critically. They're not thinking about them on a material level, that they don't view sports as a product. But like the Rangers are charging you like $140 tonight to get in against the Blues to sit behind the Billy Joel banner and play a bad team. The Blues are not a particularly good team right now. And it's a minimum of $140 to get in. That doesn't account for how you're getting there. If you have to go out to dinner before, if you're going to eat at the game, that doesn't account for drinks. That doesn't account for getting home. At minimum, you are spending probably $200 by yourself, not including anyone you're going with, just to get in the door on a Monday night in November against a non-conference opponent that isn't particularly good. At a certain point, you have to realize that they don't care because they are always going to be able to fill the building with people who will. And that's a testament to the Rangers having a strong, dedicated, and loyal fan base. But I don't particularly want to pay to see this team right now. They start playing better, sure. I usually end up going to more games in the second half of the season anyway, as the season develops. But right now, it's hard to get riled up about the results on the ice because this is predictable. Last year, an outlier. Last year, the results were not this clunky. The transition play was better, at least through the first few months of the season. There was definitely a funk there in January, and then Connor Mackey saved the season in Ottawa, as we all know. But
right.
This is predictable. Trouba is doing Trouba things. Miller looks lost. Other than Adam Fox, I don't have confidence in any of these defensemen. Schneider's fine, but he's not a needle mover. Up front, other than Lafreniere and Panarin and Will Cooley, I don't really feel any particular way about this group. There's just not a lot to be excited about on a nightly basis. Sure, Fox and Panarin and Shesterkin, that's enough against Seattle, against Ottawa, against Detroit. But as it's often as Cat Williams so eloquently put it, Chrysler looks like a phantom till the phantom rolls up. We haven't played Carolina yet. We haven't played the Devils yet. We've played the Islanders only once. We still got to play all of our division games. We still haven't played Pittsburgh, who I'm sure will take a nice chunk out of the Rangers, even if Pittsburgh isn't good. We still got a lot of divisional games to go. We got
Carolina,
a lot of
by the way, coming
games
up on Wednesday.
Yeah, first time playing Carolina all year. We have a lot of divisional opponents left. We have a lot of conference opponents left, for that matter. You know, we haven't played the Bruins yet. We haven't played the Lightning yet. The East is hard when you are playing the way the Rangers are. You can get by. And look, I do want to qualify all of this by saying, barring disaster, this team is making the playoffs by accident. You know,
Yeah.
they're going to beat the bad teams. There are enough bad teams in the NHL
As we
that they
as
will.
we talked about, Nick, like we've talked about this pretty much every week for the past 3 seasons now. Making the playoffs is not the goal. If you have this core in place, anything other than at least a cup final should be viewed as you didn't reach your goal. And what are you going to do differently the next season to ensure that you get to your goal? Making the playoffs with this core is not the goal. I hate when people are trying to essentially whitewash the way the Rangers are playing with their record. Because they're 12-6. Everything is fine. Making the playoffs is not the goal, dude. It's not. And I don't know how many times I have to say this for people to understand it, but you can win 70 games in the regular season. First of all, the Rangers have won 12 games. A lot of them have not been good games for the Rangers. A lot of those wins, again, that we talked about, have been because of the goaltending. You're going to win as many games in the regular season as you want. If your game is not predicated to winning in the playoffs, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have to play in such a way that is not only transferable in the playoffs, but is built for those games. I don't care what the record is now. Obviously, I'd rather win than lose, right? Like that's the goal. You need a win to get to the playoffs. Like that's shouldn't be said, but I have to say that to make sure I cross all my T's and dot all my I's here. That I'm not trying to advocate for them to lose. Like that's crazy, but you have to play games 1 through 82 in such a way that builds up to games 83 and beyond. And right now, with the way the Rangers are playing, they are hanging on by the seat of their pants, hoping that Shesterkin or Quick can steal them a game, and then they'll hop on a flight or they'll get ready for the next game and do the exact same thing. Whereas real Stanley Cup contenders will play their games 1 through 82. Obviously, there'll be, issues with that and you can't win all 82, whatever. But real cup contenders are building right now
Week over
for
week,
April, May,
game
and
over
June.
game. That's
Yeah,
part of what it
right.
means to be a Stanley Cup contender.
Until
you're
that happens
getting
with the
better.
Rangers, they can't call themselves a cup contender. I'm sorry, but that's not what that phrase means. If you are a cup contender, that means you are playing, not only playing structurally well, you are playing in a way that you are beating up good teams. And also looking not having 9 shots on goal, scoring on 5 of them, and as the other team has 70, right? Like that's not how the playoffs. You can't win the playoffs playing that way. You can't give up 60 shots to Calgary and just call it a day and be happy with that. That's not going to work in the playoffs. You are not a cup contender if you play like that against teams that you shouldn't be playing against, or against any team for that matter. You're going to be playing Florida. You're going to be playing Carolina in these playoffs. If you can't beat them now and they are outworking you, they're out hustling you, they're getting to loose pucks, their forecheck is better, their structure is better, then how do you propose in April, May, and June when we have to play them again? How do you propose you beat them then if you can't beat them now?
I will be absolutely floored if they trade Krider or Trouba in season. I just genuinely, I don't think it will happen. I think there aren't any teams that could afford to take Trouba. I mean, sure, the Rangers could retain, but at the same time, he's got a list. He's probably blocked a lot of the teams. He's got a lot of teams that would be able to, the teams that would be able to afford him, he's almost certainly put on his no trade list to block being traded there. We also have to deal with, as I said, the Larry Brooks report that he might refuse to report, which also might quell any market for him. I don't think it's happening. I think this is pure posturing. I think it's very funny that the Rangers immediately went the terrorist route of threatening someone that's cared about as opposed to the person that's actually being the problem. Instead of saying we would like Mika Zibanejad to play better, we threatened to trade his best friend as a means of coercing him into better play. If you really felt,
and by the way, that speaks to how bad his contract is.
Yes, correct.
He's so completely unmovable that the Rangers came out and said, "We are going to trade your best friend if you don't start playing better because we damn well can't trade you."
Yeah, that's the thing, man. When you start to think about this critically as news as opposed to sports, it starts to make sense. And I know that's not something a lot of people want to do, but like Elliot Friedman didn't just get like a letter in the mail from an anonymous, like it wasn't like not the Zapruder, it wasn't the Zodiac killer. Someone didn't cut out magazine letters and put it on a note. We Rangers want to trade Trouba and Krider. No, someone close to the team or in the team or an agent said, hey, we're trying to find a market for Trouba or Krider. Those are out there. Those reports are out there. The insider sourced reports are out there for reasons. They are not out there because these reporters are great at their jobs. They
Also,
get
Also, I don't mean to cut you off, but what does
no.
that say about the leadership group if Jacob Trouba was supposedly being traded the entirety of this past summer? That didn't happen. And now 20 games into the season, they're playing completely abysmally. And now the report is once again the captain of the team is on the trade block. What does that say about your beautiful leadership group if that keeps happening?
Okay. I'm going to make this comparison, and it's not perfect because the Giants are an atrocious football team. But and the Rangers, they won the President's Trophy. They went to the conference final. They've made the playoffs for all three of the last 3 seasons. I wholly understand that. But after that game yesterday, you saw guys on that team who are not leaders. The Giants don't have any leaders in the same way the Rangers don't. The Giants have good football players. Dexter Lawrence is a good football player. Malik Neighbors is a good football player.
I'm
The team
nodding. I'm nodding like I know.
the team
Yeah.
respects Jermaine Eleanor, who is an established veteran, long career, expensive contract. All of those guys said the effort was unserious. We were not competitive. As opposed to what you hear from the Rangers after a bad game, where it's, well, we just got to fix our mistakes. We competed pretty well. I thought we had some good chances. And look, I understand hockey players are programmed to lose all sense of personality and individualism and the ability to form thought that isn't about getting pucks in deep. But some fire, someone showing some emotion that this is unacceptable. And I know that's like performative, and I get on Trouba all the time for the fake leadership stuff. But at least somebody show a pulse. Somebody do something that gives me a modicum of hope that someone understands there's an issue here. Because I said this after the Calgary game, and I do think it's true. The way that Laviolette kept carrying on with the referees, the way Trocheck kept carrying on with the referees well after the ruling on the hand pass on the Calgary goal, part of me thinks the Rangers thought they deserved to win that game. And, well, we got jobbed by the refs. What do you want us to do when they were outshot like 55-30? At a certain point, if the Rangers don't seem to think there's a problem, what are we wasting our time caring this much? Because they don't. If they cared, they would be fixing these problems. These are the same damn problems as last year in the games they lost, as in 2 years ago when they showed up very complacent. We traded Ryan Strome for Vinny Trocheck, and that was it until the deadline, where we added mercenaries who didn't fit the team and were redundant and didn't particularly help the team's cause. Right now, the argument, and I said this last week, and I'll tie a knot on this thread here, the strongest argument for this team is that the league at large isn't very good. There are enough mediocre and bad teams that the Rangers Stars will be able to beat them. They will bank enough points that they can add reinforcements at the deadline and hope they can capture some lightning. For as much as I said about, Carolina, the Devils, Florida, Tampa Bay, Toronto, etc., you still got the bottom half of the Metro and the Atlantic. You still get to beat up on Montreal, even though the Rangers didn't really beat up on Montreal. You've got Montreal. You've got Ottawa. I know Buffalo's in a playoff spot, but I don't take Buffalo particularly serious. I know Buffalo beat the shit out of the Rangers. I don't take Buffalo particularly seriously. You've got Philly. You've got Columbus. You've got Pittsburgh. That's more than enough teams in the East for the Rangers to get to the points threshold to make the playoffs. But as we've said, the goal here isn't to make the playoffs. It's to win the trophy and have one of those parades, because it's going on 30 seasons now without one of those. And this is supposed to be a world-class organization. And I see a pizza place manager who's very comfortable in his job, where he's the general manager and the president of the team. And he gets a lot of money to do both of those jobs. And he's done very little to show complacency isn't acceptable, because anytime he's made moves, they haven't really meant a whole lot.
I want to go back to the tweet that I got yesterday from the guy that was yelling about the record and how great they were. And the Panthers have lost 5 in a row. Are they a tire fire? It doesn't matter.
They won
They
their Stanley
won.
Cup.
They won the Stanley Cup. Like, yeah, would they not like to lose 5 in a row? Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't. But they just won the Stanley Cup. So by default, like, their mistakes are not as magnified. The Rangers
You
have
get a
been
grace period. You win a
yeah,
Stanley Cup.
of course, there's a grace period. And again, I'm not saying that the Panthers should just completely stop playing the game and for them to just pack it up and say, "Oh, we won. All right, well, GG's. Talk to you later." That's not what I'm saying either. But with them, it's okay. Well, you've lost 5 in a row. The mistakes are going to get ironed out. It's whatever. Their issues are the. I'm back. I don't know what
You're
happened.
good. You're good. You're good.
Their mistakes are a lot less magnified because they just won. The Rangers have been knocking on the door. They keep saying they're close. They keep saying they're a couple bounces away, that they're right there. The same problems have prevailed for years and years and years now of the same core with 4 different head coaches with the same problems. And at a certain point, like you could tweet at me and say, "Oh, but this team's losing. Oh, but that team's losing." It's not the same.
This isn't a
It's
podcast
not
for
the
one of
same.
those teams. This isn't a Florida Panthers
Right.
podcast. What you should not be worrying about what the other teams are doing. Is your team doing
Yeah.
everything it can to win these games? And the answer is no. Why
Right.
is that? Well, Trocheck's not back checking. They are that line for as many goals and chances as they create. They are giving more back defensively. Zibanejad and Krider do nothing to help offensively at 5-on-5. Cooley Kako, they're exempt from this conversation largely because they don't play enough to bear enough responsibility. They are generating enough offense where I have no real qualms. But the one thing I wanted to get in stylistically, because I was talking to Josh Califin about this over the weekend, defense is a team effort. And the Rangers forwards do not participate in that effort.
No,
They do not participate in the effort. So, like, as much as I've been disappointed in K'Andre Miller's performance this season, as much as Trouba and Lindgren have struggled, the forwards need to do more to help. And that's twofold. That's actively defending, trying to pressure puck carriers and force decisions. And that's part of transition. When you think about it, close your eyes and think about Adam Fox at a regroup behind the net. There need to be defensemen. There need to be players at the half walls to receive that outlet pass. When you try that bomb pass out of the zone in one pass over and over and over again, the defense is going to stop respecting you. They're going to force you to thread that pass every single time. That was my lasting memory of the Carolina bubble series, was the Rangers spent 3 games trying to fire 100-foot passes up the length of the ice, and Carolina intercepted them. They dumped it back in and forced the Rangers to try and break out again and again and again. And to play Edmonton, who's very similar to you in their weaknesses in transition, and not make a conscious effort to force Brett Kulak, to force Darnell Nurse, to force Ty Emberson, to force Josh Brown, to make defensive plays, is a stinging indictment of the Rangers' attempts to win. I don't know if you remember or read, there was an article right after the Dodgers won the World Series where a couple guys on the Dodgers all said, yeah, the Yankees are a really talented team. But when you actually make them force the Yankees to make plays, that's where you can beat them. Defense, running the bases. It's the same idea here with the Rangers, with Edmonton. The difference is the Oilers didn't beat themselves. They said, okay, the Rangers are going to give us space. Let's attack them in transition. Let's attack them off the rush. The Rangers didn't do anything to try and make the Oilers uncomfortable in dumping the puck in, cycling, forechecking of any discernible kind.
Yeah. Which goes back to what we talked about earlier, where you could trade one player, but that all of a sudden will make everybody else magically forecheck.
You could drop Connor McDavid on this team right now, and sure, they put up a lot more points. He would drive a line by himself. Eventually, someone else would need to be able to score. I made the comparison that last year during the Cup final, that the Oilers were the highest end version of the Rangers, that they depend on a handful of guys. For them, it's McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard to make a few plays to swing games for them. At a certain point, you get out depth. The Rangers right now are facing the lingering probability that they have 2.5 of those guys in Shesterkin, Panarin, and Fox. The problem is a defenseman and a goalie impact the game a lot less than high end forwards. You are always going to be able to go further with McDavid and Draisaitl, McKinnon and Rantanen, even Barkov and Kachuk than you would with Adam Fox and Shesterkin. That's not a knock on those guys. Shesterkin is the best goalie in the world, and Fox is one of the 2 or 3 best defensemen in the world. There's only so much they can do if no one else wants to help. And I think that should be the big takeaway from this episode today, Andrew. Even if they swing a trade, even if they bring in Trevor Zegras, if they bring in Brady Tkachuk, whoever, that's one person. That's
I don't
not
think they.
fixing.
Brady Kachuk would be great. I don't think that does anything.
I don't think that fixes the problem.
I also I was texting with somebody who is is closer to the Sens organization, and Krider is somebody that the Senators would take a look at because they're the kind, like he's the kind of power forward big player that the Senators would look at, but they wouldn't trade anybody close to Brady Kachuk's worth in return for Krider. Why would they?
Yeah.
Like that, as much as the Rangers would love Brady Kachuk, I would love Brady Kachuk on this hockey team. Sure. Okay. But not only would you have to move Krider, you'd have to move out a lot more to make that happen. And again, would Ottawa even want to move away from Brady Kachuk? I don't know. I don't think, I don't know what the answer is to that. But one move isn't changing the fundamental DNA of this team. And that is, a problem that takes a long time to fix. Time that the Rangers don't have, nor have started the process of doing. If you want to start fixing the issue, that takes a while to
do
fix.
this was the summer.
Yeah.
You had 3 whole months to make changes. And look, if you want to be the ruthless bad guy that Chris Drury tries to portray himself as, that means ruffling some feathers. That means upsetting people, as opposed to having your fight behind closed doors after you lost to the Devils. When you and Gallant had it out, when everybody heard, the locker room heard, whatever. Maybe take some accountability. Hey, Chris, when do you talk to the media and show your face? When do you take accountability for these mistakes, other than the draft and other than the trade deadline? Because I have some questions about Mika Zibanejad. I have some questions about Jacob Trouba, about Ryan Lindgren. And what you that's what I would love to do. Give me the truth serum. I want to ask Chris Drury what you think the problem with the team is, because that would tell me everything. Because does he think it's that his guys aren't executing well enough, or does he understand that his guys aren't good enough? Because I really do think on some level he thinks they are good enough and they're not playing like it. That would tell me all I need to know. That would tell me this is not a serious general manager. That would tell me he was complacent. And he can throw that word all around, accusatory at guys on the team as much as he wants. He's the complacent one. He's the one who wants to lock himself into guys for 7 years with full no move clauses. He's the one who thinks he's this great evaluator of talent. Don't go and tell me it's the player's fault when you pick them. At a certain point, it's your fault. You don't get to blame just the players. You've gone through 2 coaches in 3.5 seasons. Tell me what the problem is, Chris. Help me understand if you understand, because I don't think he does. I really don't. And it comes into the logic stuff. We talked about, why'd they fly Hedel to Calgary for him to not play in either game? Why'd they fly Mancini there when they had Ruedel with the team? These decisions tell me there is disconnect. There is a problem somewhere. Where the problem is, I'm trying my best here, people. I know you can see the gears turning in my head trying to piece together theories. At a certain point, man, why am I going to get this mad? The team doesn't care. Trocheck's not back-checking. Zibanejad's not playing good defense. Trouba's not playing defense. Lindgren's not playing defense. Miller's not playing defense. Why should I care more than them?
That's what it boils down to. And the Rangers right now are fundamentally one of the most complacent teams in the league right now. They're cool with it. And until there is reasonable change, either in on ice performance.
Attitude. I want an attitude change.
Sure. I would love an attitude change. That's not going to happen, but I would love that. Until I see either a big shift in their on ice performance, whether that be, they can still, I'm not saying they have to win every game the rest of the way, but I'd like to see them play the game relatively well. We saw it pretty much all of last season. They played a lot of good games. They beat good teams throughout the course of the year, and that built the belief in us and from a lot of people around the league that the Rangers are actual contenders. Oh, they're playing well-structured hockey. They're never out of games no matter what the deficit is. They're always coming back. They're always, putting pressure on the other team, et cetera, et cetera. Until I see that kind of play come back, or until, maybe there's some kind of bigger roster shakeup, whether it be a Krider trade or a Trouba trade or whatever it is, until I see some kind of shift in logic, either on ice or personnel, nothing is going to change. We can all talk a big talk about complacency. We can all talk about, oh, we got to be better at, all these bland hockey answers that we've heard a bajillion times before. Until we see a fundamental actual change in something, you can say whatever you want. It doesn't matter.
Changing one thing on a team doesn't get the result you want, and I think that's really been my biggest critique of Drury is I don't think he's made conscious enough efforts to get the change he wants. We lampooned that first offseason repeatedly because it didn't make Mika Zibanejad play tougher. It didn't make Chris Kreider play tougher. It didn't make Ryan Strome, subsequently Vincent Trocheck, play any tougher. The Rangers do not get the desired change they want because they're not taking the action. They are going through the motions. They are adding one guy who does one thing as opposed to trying to develop a team that fits a singular identity. Florida is great at what they do because everyone buys in. Carolina, regardless of the roster turnover, it works because those guys all buy in. The Rangers take guy from this team, guy from that team, guy from this team, coach from that team, coach from this team, and wonder why it doesn't work. I said it. I always say this, and this will be the last thing I have before we get out of here. Just because someone was successful somewhere else does not mean they will be successful when you bring them to your team. Just because they were successful somewhere else doesn't necessarily mean your team fits what they want, what they're good at.
It's like
And
every law commercial. Past
yeah,
results don't mean that you're going to win the next time. Like past results don't guarantee future outcomes, right? That's the line.
yeah, and especially in something as fluid as sports where teams run different systems, the tendencies are different. You play with different players. And a lot of this team has been here for a little bit now. This is not year 1 or 2 of this project. This is 7 years on from the letter about we're rebuilding the team, we're going to start over. And the bones of that are in place. You picked in the top 5 multiple times. You drafted Miller and Schneider with extra first round picks. You drafted Hedel. You drafted Lias Anderson. You drafted all of these pieces. You spent money on Zibanejad to keep him because you thought he was good enough. You went out and spent money on Trocheck because you thought he was good enough. You went out and spent money on Panarin because he was good enough. Same thing with Trouba. You traded for him and extended him because you thought he was good enough to augment the pieces you were developing. And the real bitch of this all is it's not the developed guy's problem. Like, I think Cooley, Lafreniere, Kakko, Fox, Miller to lesser extent, Shesterkin for sure. It's not those guys' fault this team is where it is right now. It's the guys who have been here, or in Trocheck's case, the guys who are supposed to push them over the top. It's those guys who are the problem right now. It is not the younger pieces that are disappointing. It is the big dogs who are supposed to play like big dogs that are letting the team down right now. And that's why this feels more existential than other losing streaks and bad games over the last handful of seasons. We have seen this team over the last few years have moments like this. Last year, they got smoked by Vancouver in January. They got smoked by Buffalo in December. They got smoked by Carolina in January. It happens. We're going on year 4 of this group as serious playoff team. I am going to keep watching because I'm a sicko. Andrew is going to keep watching because he's a sicko. Most of the people, I can assume if you are listening to a podcast about the Rangers, that's an hour every week, you're going to keep watching. But at a certain point, I have to ask, is the general manager watching his team? Because the way the Rangers talk about the games they lose leads me to believe that they think, oh, we just got to play better. Then play better. You don't get to do I thought we were pretty good. We just didn't execute well enough. We didn't play well enough. Then play better.
How many?
I hate.
There's got to be. This is never gonna happen, but it'd be funny if it did. There should the NHL should set a limit of how many times a season you can say that in a presser.
Skill issue. That's all it is. It's a skill issue.
How many times can you really go up to a mic after a loss and say, we have to play better, or the chances were there, we just didn't execute? How many times are you? There should be a set number you are allowed to say that before you are legally obligated to say something else. Because you can't say we have to play better 70 times a season. Because at a certain point, like, that's a skill issue, brother. Like, you gotta either get people that can play better, or fundamentally change the way this team plays. There's no, you can't just every other day. By the way, they're just play 5 games in 7 days here. I don't want to hear after 4 of them, oh, we could have played better. That doesn't, like, what does that tell me? It tells me nothing, and that actually makes me more angry because you keep saying it. Stop saying it. Actually go out there and do it.
Hey man, maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe Rempe will rip Binnington's skull out of his head like a predator in one of the movies, and we'll get a trophy out of this loss tonight. Because at a certain
Hang the
point, man,
banner.
hey, we beat Jordan Binnington in December 2 years ago, and that got gallant the rest of the season. And also, a week later, gave us the Barclay Goodrow 2 turnovers to do Jack Hughes goals against the Devils in December. So, all right, that'll do it for this episode of Andrew and I being mad and rambling of Liberty Blue. We'll talk to you guys, assuming next Monday, barring any trade actually does happen, in which case we'll do something in the interim. But we'll talk to you guys next week. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, get the alarm bell on so you get a notification whenever a stream or new content goes live. We will talk to you guys next week.